Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Colts Cover-2 podcast. I am IndyStar's Colts insider Jim Ayello, and I am joined, as always, by my fellow insider, Joel A. Erickson. We are here to preview the Colts' Week 4 game against the Oakland Raiders. It's at home again, so 2 in a row for the Colts after starting off on the road, too. Got some interesting things to talk about. Defense did not look good Sunday against the Falcons. You have some interesting thoughts on what the linebackers, the difference between the play of the two linebackers that are on the field the majority of the time. Anxious to hear those, because obviously with Darius Leonard still in concussion protocol, that will be relevant.
Right. As of today, he is still not practicing.
Right.
So there is at least 2 steps in the protocol he has not completed yet.
T.Y. Hilton's also not practicing, and we'll have to talk about how the Colts offense might adjust to not having him, or if he might not play, and what his status might be going forward. What we will not be talking about is kicking for the first time in, 3 weeks, seems like, forever. Andrew Luck and Vinatieri off the table in this conversation, I think. So that's...
Yeah, there were 2 very dominant storylines there for a long time.
Yeah.
And they're sort of falling a little bit by the wayside now.
If Adams perfect again on Sunday, that pretty much isn't a story anymore. Unless he starts going off the rails again or something like that. But
right.
No, we've moved on. We're past that now, which is nice. So yeah, let's get into it. And we'll get into predictions at the end, because I'm going to make Joel make predictions about things that he doesn't like doing. So, and I'll even look up a Vegas number to see if I can.
Although I'm doing okay so far.
I'm bad. I'm 1-2. I had the Colts at 2-1 at this point, but I picked 2 games wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And I think
I'm undefeated.
You're on the money.
Mm-hmm.
You had him losing the Chargers too, huh?
Mm-hmm.
God, I'm so mad. I was the only.
I was 3 points off the score, I think, in the preseason too.
It's so stupid. I was the only one in this media room that picked the Colts to win that game, and if Vinny had just hit one of those kicks, I would have been right. But never. That's not why I'm bitter. No grudges held there. So let's get into defense, because I think you and I, we talked a lot about the offense in our kind of initial reaction podcast after
right.
how good Jacoby was, how good Frank Reich was. Defensively, Atlanta kind of just ripped him apart, and we got a chance to talk to Matt Eberflus, to the defensive coordinator for the Colts. He didn't go into a great detail, pretty much said that there were some plays they'd like to have back, specifically one player.
Yeah, so obviously last week, and with Leonard possibly having to miss this game too, they've got Bobby Okereke playing the mic, Anthony Walker plays the will, and Eberflus is not generally the type of guy who's going to call anybody out overtly, so I think Colts fans by now, 2 years into this, sort of know you got to kind of read between the lines with Eberflus. And this is sort of a combination of reading between the lines and just what we saw, both live and what I've seen since then. But he said Bobby Okereke made some mistakes early. He did like the way he kind of came back and made less mistakes, or less of the same mistakes. And then we were talking about Anthony Walker, and he said, I'm really proud of the way he played. So I think...
You see a difference there.
Yeah, I think the 14 tackles from Walker, and I think, to me, and I don't know. It's hard to tell sometimes what the fan base thinks of a player, but I know somebody said something about Walker not being in the right zone or having trouble when players were in his zone. A lot of those passes were to wide receivers, and I don't really expect Anthony Walker to take away passes to Julio Jones. But the other thing is, I think the thing that just kind of keeps sticking out to me with Anthony Walker is he makes a lot of plays in the open field.
Mm-hmm.
He's a very sure tackler when he's one-on-one in the open field, if he's in position. And I think that's been huge for them. It has not been great in the run game. It really hasn't in any of the 3 games so far. Far too many creases. But I don't. Just based on what Eberflus said, I think that the rookie had some rookie moments, and I think that's something. It's something to watch this week, because the Oakland Raiders do have a run game. They have Josh Jacobs.
Yep.
I think he's averaging over 5 yards a carry, actually, and so that Jon Gruden will run the ball and will get yards doing that, and so they've got to figure out this run game thing. It's one thing to try to be better against opposing quarterbacks, but you got to take away the run game, because some of these teams, the better their run game is, the better that quarterback looks.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like what you said. I wanted to go back to Anthony Walker a little bit, because I thought what we saw, I don't know that he's, I mean, maybe you can tell me I'm wrong, but I don't think he's necessarily the most physically gifted linebacker out on the field.
Well, it depends on what gifts you're talking about.
Well, he
could bench press my house.
He's a big, strong man.
But he's not necessarily the rangiest or speediest guy.
Yeah, okay. I guess I was more to say he's not a guy you're drafting in the first round if you're looking for a first round linebacker.
Right.
And so again, obviously strengths and weaknesses. But to me, what stood out when I watched him was just how smart he was. And again, obviously a sure tackler, but he seems to me, at least especially in the run game, to be in the right position a lot of the time.
Well, and that going back to the run defense. Anthony's one of those guys that we talk to all the time, and he sort of said that there were people who missed gaps in the first game, but not him.
You don't think so?
No, he doesn't. So
because he won't say that about himself. I was perfect.
Well, he said here's the thing. He does say when he does say that he says I take it upon myself as a middle linebacker. It falls on me to make sure everybody's in the right spot.
Right.
But he didn't say I wasn't in the right spot.
Right, but on Sunday he wasn't playing middle either. Anyway,
right, he was playing well, and Eberflus kind of spoke at length about how difficult that is, and that it's far more difficult than people think it is to play that position, and thought that he really played it well. I was really interested in that, actually. By the way, the difference between Mike and Will, because usually when we ask players, they're like, "Oh, it's not that different." Eberflus disagreed pretty strongly with that assessment.
Yeah,
saying it was like a center having to move out to guard. Right tackle having to move to left tackle, which is very difficult. There are some guys who just can't play one of the other sides.
Right.
It's possible. And so I think that's interesting to me that the positions are that different and that they feel like they can move him back and forth. I think part of it, too, is that they're moving him back and forth because Okariki's a rookie and you don't have him learn more than one spot if you don't have to. Really 100% learn it.
Right. I was going to say, I think Okariki maybe next year will be expected to have known more than his position, but for a guy like Anthony Walker, and again, this speaks to his intelligence, I think, because I think Eberflus was saying he's a guy who pays attention to everybody on defense. He knows everybody's responsibilities.
And this is a story I did last year. I did a longer story on his role, but Anthony Walker does this thing every week where he watches film on his own, I think on Mondays, and on Tuesday when the players come in, because Monday's kind of their off day, on the Tuesday when the players come in to start meetings, he has his own set of notes on the opponent for the linebackers that he gives out before they've even talked to Eberflus, before they've been in a position meeting. And Darius Leonard, if I remember him saying, Darius Leonard said, a lot of times it's stuff that ends up helping a lot in the game. And that's before the coaches even have a chance to get a hold of him. So he's very cerebral. He's very, very knowledgeable about what's going on, and has his own play sheet, note sheet that he plays off of. That's very valuable for the guy who makes the calls. And Bobby Okereke was making a lot of the calls.
Yeah.
In terms of who was actually saying it verbally, because that's what the mic's role is. But the checks and stuff, you could see, if you were watching the game on Sunday, you could see Anthony Walker still making some of the checks pre-snap.
How valuable is it then to have a guy like to have a guy like Walker out there for Okereke going into a second game? And we knew that they had already kind of played together. They played together in the preseason in these positions, so that there was something to build on a little bit. And now they're going to go into a second regular season game having that. Would you expect Okereke to kind of take a step forward just because he might be a little more comfortable, especially playing next to a guy like Anthony Walker?
You'd hope so. I think Gruden's offense is going to mess with the Colts' vision a little bit. Like he's big into motion and misdirection and stuff like that. And so it's going to be tough. It's a tough second game. I think there's a few schemes in the NFL where you don't have to worry about your eyes being in the wrong place. But if I remember right, just from last year's game, I remember thinking, man, Gruden does a lot of stuff to try to get you looking in the wrong spot.
Yeah, and they have weapons, too. I mean, you mentioned it with Josh Jacobs. He's definitely a weapon. Tyrell Williams has taken a big step forward. I think he was just kind of unnoticed in Los Angeles.
Well, and he's kind of a deep threat. He's going to be less of the, I think, the Keenan Allen, Julio Jones, they're just open all the time type of guy. But he is a very good deep threat.
They've been using him a little more often than that. Than taking
a little
shots.
bit, but not like
a
little bit, but not the guy they're really using is Darren Waller.
Darren Waller, yeah, and he's the other one. That's the other one I was going to mention was their tight end, a guy that kind of came out of nowhere. I mean, he wasn't like a household name tight end right now, but the guy had I think 14 targets, 13 catches last week, and I think the first 2 games he had 6 or 7 catches in both those games as well. So they're using him a lot.
One thing to watch with Waller, I remember reading that the last 2 games he hasn't had his first catch until the middle of the second quarter.
Okay.
Which is pretty crazy for a guy who I think has 26 catches on the year.
Yeah.
And especially for a guy, he didn't have his first catch till the middle of the second quarter on last Sunday, and he caught 13 passes after that. So I would expect that the way he's been producing, that they'll probably get him involved more often. That's going to be a guy his skill set is probably more like Eric Ebron. He's got that kind of stretch the field athletic ability. For those of you who watched Hard Knocks, you know that this has been coming for a while. He's going to create some problems. And I think him and Tyrell Williams together create some problems down the field, especially against a Colts secondary that doesn't have Malik Hooker.
Well, that's what I was going to say. I mean, tight ends, you generally think, okay, it's going to be a linebacker or a safety, and right now the Colts are missing their best linebacker and their best safety. So that I mean, this could be an issue for the Colts going in, is not having Malik Hooker kind of playing that center field and having some coverage abilities. And we'll see, I want you to talk about Kerry Willis, because we heard Eberflus say that he actually had some nice man-to-man coverage skills at Michigan State. But again,
yes, I have lots of insight into that,
okay,
actually.
Good. Well, yeah, that's what I'm saying. So you have a linebacker. You're going to be asking your linebackers and safeties to contain a guy who's going to be heavily peppered with targets this week. So that's going to be a lot of responsibility for rookies like Okereke and Kerry Willis to take on. It seems like, again, if you're reading between the lines a little bit, Eberflus is very high on Kerry Willis versus where Bobby Okereke needs to. He's not done on him, but he needs to take some steps forward. But Kerry seems to have a lot of good things to say.
And I think that tracks with what we saw in camp.
Yeah.
It just felt like Okereke was a step late sometimes in camp on plays that he made. Like just wasn't there right at the point. And Willis, on the other hand, sort of kind of grabbed your attention right from the start and got first team reps right from the start.
Okay.
And the other thing is, I think, and this doesn't have anything to do with Okereke and Stanford, but the Sunday, depending on when you're listening to this, my story will either be up. The goal is to have it up on Thursday morning. But I talked to Mark D'Antonio this week about Kerry Willis,
Michigan State head coach.
And their safeties, we've heard this from the Colts, but to have D'Antonio say it, just to back it up, they played him in every role you can imagine. He played rolled down in the box. He played deep in zones. He was their nickel a lot of the time. Okay. He would play as their nickel in a man-to-man. Now, the thing is, I don't know that they can deploy him in that role very often now.
Yeah, without Malik.
Because there's no Malik back there. So you can't walk him, because he kind of has to be that guy, because I think we all know that Clayton Geathers is better coming forward, I think, than he probably is in zone. Sure. So I don't know if they can do a lot of that stuff, but he definitely has done anything you can think of. You might see a little bit less single high. I don't necessarily know that he's quite as rangy as Malik, and that's not a knock on him. No. Malik was a first-round pick.
I would say Malik has got incredible range.
So I think you might see more of the of Cover-2 or Cover-4. I don't know what you're going to see. That's generally what they play anyway.
Right.
But I don't necessarily know that you're going to see as much with him just floating over the top. But yeah, no, he can do a lot of stuff. He's done it all in camp. Like, I think I remember in camp just thinking 2 weeks in that I'd seen him. Most of the times I'd noticed Willis was in coverage, and there was sort of a knock on him a little bit that he was a box safety coming out. But coverage was what I noticed first of all. And I think the biggest thing going forward is just when they're playing zone, they've got to close down a little faster than they have been, especially on routes breaking over the middle. Now, there's another part to that which wasn't there on Sunday, but was there against the Chargers, and they still were giving up passes over the kind of in that middle, just underneath the zone between the linebackers and the safeties. And so I think the safeties have to close a little bit faster. Willis is going to have to be part of that, but it might also be a part of the linebackers have to drop a little bit more too, because when you do those zones, depending on how far the linebackers drop, it kind of takes away the window a little bit. But yeah, I think that's something that that needs to get better at. They need to break on those 10 to 15-yard throws faster and basically just create less easy catches for receivers.
Okay, yeah, well, let's move on. I mean, the one way you referenced it, but the one way they can help do that and the defensive line can help their secondary out is by getting to the quarterback. We didn't see them get to Matt Ryan almost at all. We talked about this on the last podcast, only 4 pressures for the pass rushers. Something interesting that was asked of Matt Eberflus, I think you would probably say the best or at least the most effective outside pass rusher so far for this year for the Colts has been Kemoko Turay in the 2 games that he's played. And he only got, I think, 13 snaps on Sunday. Eberflus kind of declined to specify why that was. He kind of alluded to it more being matchup-based, not the injury that the neck injury he's been dealing with.
The thought that I think that most of us had was that it was probably related to the neck injury that kept him out of the second game.
Right.
But he said something about matchups.
He didn't say much is the thing. Like, he really didn't.
I don't know that we have a great answer on why Kemoko Turay only got 13 snaps.
We do know that they need to get more pressure, and if Turay is going to be the guy that helps them do that, they're probably going to have to play him more. But because right now, Matt Ryan was clean for far too long in that game for the Colts. I mean, they need to get to some. And again, Derek Carr, is he Matt Ryan? Is he an MVP candidate? No, but that guy can rip.
No,
you apart.
but Colts fans should remember this, and we're going to keep coming back to this on this podcast. The Raiders until the fourth quarter were beating the Colts in Oakland last year with less talent around Derek Carr. Derek Carr can look really, really good at times and did against the Colts last year. And so there's no system change on either side of the ball. They're going to have to put a lot of pressure on him. I think you can't overreact to the pass rush yet. The first 2 games they looked really good. And in fact, I think through the first 2 weeks, I thought the pass rush was the best aspect of this defense.
That's fair.
So obviously it wasn't there last week. Matt Ryan does throw the ball very quick. There's some of that going on, but also you have to get to him more often. And I think that we got to wait a little bit and see, this week, next week against Patrick Mahomes, if the problem continues before you start kind of using it and discounting what they did the first 2 weeks.
No, I don't think you can go out and say that pass rush is a problem right now. But like you said, you can't. You saw what a guy like Matt Ryan can do, and you don't have one. Derek Carr can be that kind of guy. And
absolutely.
Patrick Mahomes, even if he's under pressure, will rip you apart. So
we'll talk about this more next week when the Chiefs are coming up. But what Mahomes does likely won't be an indication of what kind of pressure the Colts are getting.
Yeah, what the Chiefs do offensively won't be an indication of what the Colts defense is, because that offense is just ridiculous.
Mm-hmm.
And it should be fun to watch. Though, like I said, it's going to be a relatively close rematch in terms of divisional round, and then a few weeks into the season, they'd be pretty familiar with each other, these teams.
But we're skipping ahead.
Yeah, we are. I am. I'm just interested. Who isn't looking forward to that game? But what is an interesting part about that, though, is that could be the next time we see T.Y. Hilton. Maybe. I mean, based on what we talked about, you talked to him, I think, today or yesterday?
Yesterday.
And he doesn't. It doesn't seem like this quad injury is just going to magically go away. It looks like
he said, "If I can go, I'll go."
Yeah.
Which is different than saying I'm
nothing.
confident I'm gonna. Which is it's different than saying I'm confident I'll play.
Yeah.
I think the fact that they pulled him out of the game and he didn't come back indicates that there's something there with the quad. I think we learned last season that if T.Y. Hilton can play at all, he's going to want to.
Right.
Frank Reich today sort of kind of threw water on the idea that it's early in the season and you can be more cautious because it's early in the season. He was saying every game's critical, which I pretty much agree with.
Do you? I was going to ask you because I don't know if I agree with that.
I think I do.
Okay.
You can't – if he can go and their Colts are confident that there's not a risk of re-injuring it, which is why – according to Hilton, that's why they pulled him out on Sunday. They were worried that it was going to get worse.
Right.
But if he can go and they feel like he's not going to re-injure it, I think you play him because he can. I mean, guys that are healthy could get hurt in this game, and
well, yeah,
and miss stuff. And I in a 16-week season, I just don't think you can afford to make we're going to hope it's better down the road type of decision, because then next thing you know, you've turned a 2-1 start into a maybe that's played a role in you turning a 2-1 start into 2-3 start, and now you're behind the 8 ball where you could have been in front of it.
I'm not saying they should. I again, it's more just comes down to that, like, are you willing to roll the dice if there's a risk? And to me, I'm less willing to roll the dice in week 4 as I am in week 15, especially if I'm fighting for a playoff.
And that's probably true, but I think that that's probably true, and I think that despite what Reich said today, I think that probably does play a role.
I think so.
But you want this game. You want this game against the Raiders.
You have to have it. This is not one of those, like, you can't go to Kansas City and expect to win. I mean, that the Colts won't say that or think that or do any of those things, but I mean, if you're a fan of this team, they are playing very well, and I'm not saying they'll get blown out by the Chiefs by any means, but you very much want to go to Kansas City at 3-1 and then head into the bye week at worst 3-2, and then, hey, if you pull one out, you're 4-1, that's great. But you got to have this game Sunday.
Yeah, no, I think the and T.Y. Hilton said this the other day actually. The effort it took to come back from 1-5 and make the playoffs last year, they really felt it in that when they went to Kansas City for the divisional playoff game.
Right.
And so I think that for this team, after having done that last year, I think they do think about that, and we can't let ourselves get into a hole again because it's so hard to get out, and it takes so much effort even if you accomplish it. So I do think there's an emphasis on these games. They're like yes, they came back from 1-5 last year, and yes, there might be time left in the season, but the flip side of that is when you're behind the 8 ball, it's harder than when you're in front of it. It just is.
I feel like I'm speaking on both sides of my mouth. I'm saying they have to have this game, but they could probably rest T.Y. And
the thing we don't know, and I don't think the thing we're ever going to get a real answer to, is what's the risk level of him hurting himself.
Right. He said he could have torn it, or doctors told him he could have torn it if he went back out and played on
Right,
Sunday.
And if that's true going into this week, you don't play him at all.
Yeah, you keep him out.
Because why would you? Then you know there's a clear risk of him missing half a season.
I told you, if that's seriously something that they're dealing with, then I'm super inclined to rest him this week, rest him against Kansas City, give him the bye week, and give him like a full month to recover.
Well,
if
and
that's the case.
I think the other thing at play here is what Hilton wants to do, and he's going to want to play.
Yeah, I know.
And Frank Reich has sort of made it clear in his first couple of years that he listens to his players a lot when it comes to, especially his best players, when it comes to how they feel. He talked about this all the time last year when it came to Hilton not practicing essentially the entire month of December and the 2 weeks of the playoffs. And he talked a lot about how much he trusts his players to tell him and to know what's going on with their bodies. So that plays a factor in this too. I don't necessarily know it's as easy to tell T.Y. you're just going to sit out here as it would be to tell somebody else or tell him in the preseason.
Yeah, I would lie to him. I would lie to him.
Jim would be like, your leg is at risk of exploding.
Yeah, it could fall off at any moment. You need to. Yeah, we don't want to have to amputate later. So I'm honestly, like I said, it's one of those things that if they can do it to protect him, it's funny though. I'm thinking about it now. I'm like, if T.Y. can't go, it's weird. Like no one's panicking, which is like weird because last year early in the season, if T.Y. couldn't play, people would have freaked out because like there's the receiver depth wasn't that great. We didn't know the tight ends exactly how Frank was going to use them. And now if you miss T.Y., they have options, and it's crazy because you're also Devin Funchess isn't part of this game plan now.
Yeah, no, they could be missing their number 1 and number 2 receivers, and I do think there's an element here where we don't necessarily know exactly what the offense is going to look like if he doesn't play.
Yeah.
The one constant in the passing game, receiving wise, has been T.Y. He's got 20 catches.
Yeah.
The next highest Colt in receptions so far is Nyheim Hines with 8.
Yeah, and he's playing like 70 to 80% of the snaps, and everybody else is down at like, what, 30, 40, I think?
No, around 50-ish.
Who's at 50? Dion?
The second receiver has been at 50-ish.
Okay.
So Devin
then,
the first week, and then Dion.
Yeah. Okay.
And then like those guys are like, I can't remember exactly what the number was, but I think it was like 40, 33, 29-ish.
They're all pretty in that same area.
They're all kind of in the same range.
Except for T.Y., who's significantly ahead.
I do think that the big difference here between this year and last year, because I do think there's some uncertainty with Kane and Campbell and Chester Rogers, and we saw what Zach Pascal can do last week. But we learned last year that you don't necessarily count on that happening every week.
No, yeah.
But I think the biggest element here, I think that's a big change, is last year when T.Y. Hilton was not in the lineup, I don't know who your deep threat was.
Right.
And this year, teams know, even though Paris Campbell hasn't had a deep ball yet, Deion Kane and Paris Campbell are both deep threats.
I agree.
And so you can't do what you would have done last year and just roll everything up if T.Y.'s not in there and contest everything, because those guys can beat you deep. We haven't seen Campbell. We haven't seen Campbell take a target on that yet, right?
A deep pass? No,
Yeah.
I don't think he's gone deep. More than 20, 25 yards? No.
Yeah.
No.
But we have seen Deion do it,
yeah.
and Deion blew the doors off of a Titans cornerback and created a pass interference in week 2. So we have seen it with him.
For sure. He's even run that back shoulder for like 18 yards. Like he can
25,
do. Yeah.
25,
Oh,
yeah.
definitely.
So So like it's on film with Deion.
Yep.
Teams know the scouting report with Paris Campbell. They know that he's fast, and also the crossing routes he's run so far. You should see it because it's obvious that he ran away from people, and I think that changes it. It's you don't have to roll anything towards Ty, but you also can't if he's out. But you also can't just push everything close to the line of scrimmage and assume you're not going to get beat deep, because they have guys who can do that.
Yeah, I know. I mean, I guess the obvious, if you're a fan of most NFL teams, if your number one receiver is out, your immediate thought is, are they going to run the ball more? I'm not sure this Colts team can run the ball more.
No,
they're already pretty high.
No,
up there.
and they ran the ball 24 times on Sunday in a game where they didn't run it all that well for most of the game.
Nope.
And that's just that people just don't do that anymore in the NFL. They don't get over 20 carries if they're struggling like that. You see why they do it. You see why they do it when Marlon Mack has his touchdown run. You see it on the very last drive of the game where they basically run out the clock.
Yeah,
there were some throws on that, but they ran out the clock.
Yeah. It also keeps their defense fresh or off the field against a guy like Matt Ryan and Julio Jones.
And the other thing, we'll get into that here in just a second. But the other thing is, in every game so far, the Colts have had a second half breakaway run. They had it. It was early in the second half against the Chargers, the 63-yarder from Mack.
Right.
But the Jordan Wilkins one essentially won the game.
And iced the game against Tennessee. Yeah.
And last week, it's I can't remember, 26, 27 yards from Marlon Mack that really made sure that drive was going to finish.
Yep.
And so there's an element here where Reich knows it's 3 weeks in a row now. If I keep running it, even when it looks bad, eventually we're going to pop one. It keeps happening.
Yep.
So, yeah, I think you're right. I don't think that there's any – you'd really, really, really have to shut them down. And could you put 9? Would that make Frank abandon the run? Could you line up 10 guys in the box and just one single high safety? Would that make Frank abandon the run? I don't know.
Atlanta tried pretty much to make Frank give up the run.
And Frank said it after the game.
Yeah.
Frank said, they sold out, stopped the run.
And Jacoby threw for 300 yarars.
And Jacoby completed his first 16 passes.
So that tells you what they're going to do if teams try to play him like that. And again, if Oakland doesn't respect their passing game without T.Y. Hilton, Jacoby, he'll unleash Jacoby like something like that.
Well, and so this is another thing I wanted to get to. So these first 3 defenses the Colts have played, regardless of what the results are so far this season, are fairly well respected and well regarded, I think, around the league. I think the Chargers secondary, Titans definitely. And before you start yelling about Gardner Minshew, it was a Thursday night game on the road. Chill out. That's not like you can't say the Titans. And he actually only threw for 200 yards.
Yeah.
It wasn't like a 350-yard performance.
You're also not saying these are the top 3 defenses in the NFL. They're just very good
they're
defenses.
Just good secondaries.
Yeah.
And the Falcons is another one that people respect a lot. Now, you can debate back and forth whether or not what level they're at or if they're in the top tier. I mean, none of them are the Bears. But they're defenses that can take over a game at times. Atlanta made Carson Wentz look like garbage for a half the week before they played the Colts. The Chargers, obviously. And Tennessee is generally pretty good on defense. Just that's not their problem.
They ripped apart the Browns in week 1, that's for sure.
The Raiders are not those teams.
That's a nice way of saying it.
This is a team that still doesn't really have a pass rush. They have 5 sacks so far.
They used to have a guy. God, I can't remember his name. Is it Khalil Mack? Is that his name?
They did have a guy, and if I have a feeling that if he were still in Oakland, you wonder how they could have made that happen.
You should ask Jon Gruden about that.
It's almost like they gave a contract. To a player. With the money that they could have spent on Khalil Mack.
No, you want Antonio Brown for sure.
And it didn't pay off. Almost. But anyway, they've got 5 sacks so far this season. 3.5 of them are by Benson Mayowa.
Okay.
I hope I'm saying that right.
He won't listen. He doesn't know.
But there's just not a lot of they have a first rounder in Cleveland, Farrell, who's
from Clemson, yeah.
Who was highly regarded, but I think there were some teams who thought he's more of a complete defensive end than a pass rushing defensive end.
He slid down the first round for a reason. Everybody he was kind of like a top 10 guy.
No, he got picked 4th.
Oh, I'm sorry. He slid down everybody else's boards for a reason.
Right. The Raiders picked him.
Jon Gruden, you're right. Jon Gruden thought he's still great.
But I know for a fact there were teams that had him evaluated as more of an all-around type of guy who maybe would be like a 7-8 sack guy than like a 15 sack guy.
Okay.
Which is what I think the Jaguars think Josh Allen is and some of those other guys.
Yeah, Josh Allen looks good.
And they haven't had a pass rush through the first 3 weeks. And the Colts have played 3 teams that have gotten to Jacoby Brissett. And if Jacoby Brissett doesn't have to sling people off like a wild bull, like what's it going to look like?
Yeah, we haven't seen it. It's actually, all of 2017 is that. It's him getting abused by defenses.
So we haven't really seen what it looks like when he gets to just sit back. I mean, he was 16 for 16 last week, and really good overall. So I do think it's going to get a little bit easier for the offense this week, just in terms of the Raiders don't have a lot of proven talent on defense, and especially after they lost Jonathan Ebron, their rookie safety. Right. It's just not a high talent defense right now, and haven't played like one, and they don't rush the passer well, and that's probably pretty good for Indianapolis.
Fair to say, Jon Gruden, pretty good offensive schemer, not a great GM. Maybe Bill O'Brien-esque.
Well, Bill O'Brien's 2-1.
Great offensive. I think you think he's a good coach.
Right.
Maybe not a great GM.
Right.
Maybe don't quit your day job.
So this isn't the same caliber of defense they've played, and they're going to have that a little bit next week with the Chiefs too. Although it's a better pass rush in Kansas City, but I think these first 3 games that we've seen, I think there's going to be some stuff more open down the field because I don't think the caliber of player is the same.
It's funny. It's going to be hard to get more open than they were against Atlanta. Because Jacoby said it, and I think he was kind of joking because they were saying, "Hey, you started 16 for 16. Were you feeling it?" And he was kind of like, "Not really. My guys were wide open." And I mean, they were. I mean, I was watching some of the tape from on Monday, and he wasn't. He can fit the ball in tight windows if he has to. He wasn't really having to do that.
No, and so there's something else that I think gets at this. I think the fact that they have one guy with 20 catches and then a bunch of guys with 8 or 7 or 5 or 6.
Yep.
I think that helps that, actually.
For sure.
Because you can't I know it's terrible for fantasy football players. You have no idea who to start.
Yeah.
But I think in actual practice, it makes it really hard to guard this team because you can't say we've got to take away T.Y. and then we've got to take away these other people. You can and you will still say we have to take away T.Y. It just makes sense that you do that. But there's a lot of different guys who can hurt you, and they'll throw it to and they'll design a play for, and so that makes it difficult. It's like, you can say we're going to take away Eric Ebron, but he's not on the field sometimes, and then it's Jack Doyle can hurt you, and Mo Alley Cox can hurt you, and Paris Campbell can hurt you, and Deion Kane can hurt you. So there's a lot of guys that can hurt you, and sometimes if all of those guys aren't hurting you, they move Zach Pascal from a blocking role into a receiving role, and he catches a touchdown pass and another crucially important deep ball.
Yeah, that's what, and I'm going to be writing about this today. But that wheel route Zach Pascal touchdown pass is exactly like you talked about. Was that the Atlanta defense believed he's a blocking guy. So when Naheem went out on that action for a screen, they thought, he's blocking for a screen, and then it wasn't a screen. They're like, in the corner, the deep corner in the cover 3 was supposed to stick with T.Y. Hilton or stayed with T.Y. Hilton when he ran that deep post and pretty much abandoned his zone while Zach Pascal just ran down the sideline wide open for a touchdown. And I asked Frank Reich today, I said, Zach Pascal didn't have a target before week 3. Mo Cox, I think, had 1. They both had big catches. I think they had 4 or 5 combined catches for over 100 yards, something like that, close to 100 yards. Anyway, you have to the fact that he puts that on tape means defenses go, okay, we can't just let go of Mo Cox and let go of Zach Pascal because they know they're just out there blocking. We really have to respect all those guys as well as guarding against T.Y. Hilton.
Right, and if they do leave them alone, then they get hurt.
Yeah, exactly.
Like the Falcons did.
I wanted to ask you, because we're gonna get into prediction time now. Do you remember your prediction, your preseason prediction of this game?
I know I had the Colts winning. I have no idea what the score was.
This is gonna be our Stump Joel. This is gonna be our Stump Joel thing for the day.
If we keep Stump Joeling my predictions, I'm not gonna get a single one of them.
I
don't remember the scores.
I just want to know what you guessed.
I feel like I probably guessed something like 31-20.
No, you went higher on both.
Oh, really?
Yeah, you went for like a bloodbath of offense. Which, to be honest with you, you kind of described in your analysis so far today.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
You've kind of talked.
The Raiders can hurt you on offense.
Right, and then you also talked about how this is going to be the easiest matchup for the Colts.
So far, yeah.
Yeah, so a month ago, this is where your brain was. It hasn't changed. You had the Colts at 38, Raiders 26.
Okay.
You feel good about that? Or are you going to lower it a little?
No, I don't hate that.
Okay.
I don't think the Raiders can stop anybody.
I agree with you. I had Colts 30, Raiders 23.
I mean, they stopped Denver, but have you been paying attention to Denver?
Oh yeah, it's not good. It's not good.
So yeah, I just don't have a lot of respect for the Raiders defense. Sorry, Raiders defense.
They're not listening. It's fine. So big picture then. 3-1 start for this team after Andrew Luck retires suddenly 2 weeks before the season after Adam Vinatieri melts down for 2 games. It's hard to ask for more.
No, I think
if that happens, I should say. Yeah, I'm not. If they're 2-2 after the end of this, it's going to be different.
I talked to somebody. I talked to a friend of mine. We've talked about this. The normal people fan that you have.
Yeah.
And somebody about this earlier this week or just after last week when they got to 2-1, and he said even with luck, he was thinking if we can get through the first 5 games at 3-2 or 2-3, I feel pretty good about it. So you take luck away, and they might get if they can get to 3-1 and go 3-1 going into Kansas City. I think, yeah. I mean, even if you were predicting it with luck, that's what you would have been at. I
think you immediately after. I will admit to being emotionally shook when Luck retired. If you had Luck retired on that Sunday or that Saturday night, is that what it was? And you showed me a schedule right then and there and be like, pick. I would have been lost against the Chargers, lost against the Titans, probably lost against Atlanta. Maybe they beat Oakland and they're 1-3. Honestly, that's how I would have felt at the time. Now, eventually, I think I picked them to start 3-1. But man, I don't think nationally that was the way people were seeing it.
Well, I think the other thing I keep thinking about is they're 2-1 right now, and the defense really hasn't played all that well.
No, exactly.
As an overall,
Frank talked about this today. They really haven't played 3 phases well yet.
No, and when he said that, I almost tweeted it out, and I was like, well, this is kind of obvious.
Yeah, but special teams was not great. Obviously,
the first 2 games.
First 2 games, exactly. They finally were better week 3, but the defense didn't play that well. And I think, to be honest with you, I think the offense has been relatively consistent.
Struggled against Tennessee mid-second quarter to the end of the game.
Fair enough.
Much.
Yeah, that's fair. Okay, so yeah, they really haven't put all 3 phases together yet, and they're 2-1, which is again a good sign for.
And actually. You can almost make the case that until the Falcons game, they only had one of the phases really working in any of those games because it was really just the offense in Los Angeles, and it was really just the defense in Tennessee for most of it. And then they got the offense and the special teams I thought were together were pretty decent.
On Sunday?
On Sunday.
Yeah.
Paris Campbell almost broke one. Yeah. Roland Milligan had an unbelievable play in kick coverage that George Odom cleaned up. Something else I was trying to think of. But
Vinatieri was 5 for 5.
Vinatieri was 5 for 5. So the special teams were a lot better. So I think they had 2 phases.
Yeah.
But they were right in 2 games with just 1 phase working. So yeah, I think that I think the way the takeaway is this team has said we're not going to build ourselves around Andrew Luck. We're going to be good and this wouldn't have been true in the past. Even with Jacoby coming in 2 years ago, there was not this at all. But this is stuff that that's like are you gonna bet against Marlon Mack and this offensive line continuing to run the ball well? No. Are you going to bet against? There are some people who may still have some reservations on Brissett, but I don't.
You tweet out literally, if you have questions about Brissett right now, I don't know what they are, and I completely agree with you.
Yeah, I
don't know what they are right now. I mean, maybe there'll be something that emerges. But
and at some point he's not going to look as.
He's not going to throw for 70% and 7 touchdowns and 1 interception.
Yeah, at some point he's going to have a stinker. That's just the way it is. Everyone has stinkers, but they're at a point now where you're going, okay, the goals they had at the beginning should be the goals they have now.
It's crazy. I mean, not crazy, but they said that all along.
Mm-hmm.
Whether or not you believe them, and to me, at first I was like, no, you can't.
I think most people didn't believe them.
No,
right
you couldn't.
away.
I mean, if you were being honest with yourself, you couldn't. But you can't. Nope. There aren't teams in the NFL that lose all pro quarterbacks and are just fine. Like it just doesn't happen. So, what's happening right now is pretty rare, and a reflection, I think, on the team that Ballard has built and the Reich's coaching.
I thought it mattered a lot on Sunday that the Falcons sold out to stop the run, and Brissett carved him up. I thought that mattered a lot.
Yeah.
I thought it really mattered a lot to have a game where they had 79 yards on 24 carries, didn't get most of that rushing yards to the final drive, and the offense still was the driving force in a win, because I think that's what we all thought they wouldn't be able to do.
Okay. I think what I'm hearing is shootout with Patrick Mahomes in 2 weeks is what you're saying.
Well, I actually think that if they're going to beat Patrick Mahomes in 2 weeks, and we'll talk about this a ton next week.
I know. I keep doing it. It's my fault.
We'll talk about this a ton next week, but it gets to something that we've seen. I think if they're close with Patrick Mahomes, it's because they've done this thing that they've done the first 3 games where no one gets the ball for very much.
Okay.
There's been if you look at the possession charts of Colts games versus NFL games at large, and spoiler alert, I'm probably going to do this next week. The Colts had the ball 7 times on Sunday. That's just weird.
The Falcons had the ball in the first half for about 45 seconds.
The Colts only had the ball once in the third quarter.
Yeah.
And that's really how it's been. Like, I think I have to go back and look for sure, but like the Colts play these quarters with the way they run the ball and with some of the efficiency in their passing game. That's the thing, but when Jacoby's completing 71% of his passes, the clock is still moving. Mm-hmm. There's not a lot of clock stoppage. And so in a game against Mahomes, and this is what we thought they would do in the playoffs last year. We're giving you a very excessive preview of a game that's not here yet. They're going to try to keep him off the field.
They have to. Also, the way you're making me think about this with all the limited possessions and the fact that you wrote a story this week about how they're not getting penalized, they're playing very fast games. Like, I know they're all probably around 3 hours because the NFL is that way, but I bet they're on the very, very like high end of speed in terms of games.
Oh, they've been I know just anecdotally, just thinking like looking at games around the league while you're sitting there in like timeouts or whatever.
Yeah.
Injuries, stuff like that. And there were a lot of injuries on Sunday, and I think that's the only thing that stretched it out, because there's a lot of like first quarters and stuff so far that you're like, wait, the quarter's over?
It happened against the Chargers. I was like, is the quarter already over? Is that are we done? And
so you're going to see that this week with the Raiders. You're going to see that. I think you're going to see that all season. And I think that's probably the right way to play it.
No, it's a lot of running, it's a lot of hyper efficient passing, and it's a lot of not penalties. Those are the 3 things that make that
slow down games.
Yeah, I mean, exactly. And then injuries are the only other thing. And the Colts, haven't really had any like knock on wood major injuries. Like Malik Hooker played through his; he didn't stop the game.
They're in this weird situation with injuries where like it feels like they've been pretty healthy, but they also haven't been because their quarterback retired and Devin Funchess broke his clavicle, and now Malik Hooker's out.
And Jabal Sheard hasn't played yet.
So they've had some major injuries, but they haven't had 5 or 6 people inactive for injury yet.
It's crazy. Again, I keep getting back to it. Like I said, if you would have told me no Devin Funchess, no Jabal Sheard, T.Y. Hilton, Malik Hooker, all getting hurt.
Darius Leonard misses a game.
Darius Leonard misses a game, and Andrew Luck retired. I've been like, yeah, 0-15. No, I'm kidding.
I think you would have thought 0-3.
Yeah, it's just crazy to me if you give me all these numbers.
2 of those games on the road, the Falcons are really good.
Well, here's the other stat that we got from Matt Eberflus. At one point during a game, they had 5 rookies on the field.
Mm-hmm.
That's not a good sign, or at least doesn't seem like
for
it,
most
right?
teams.
Yeah, you'd be like, oh God, you don't want 5 rookies on the field. That's probably because that means you have 2 undrafted guys out there and a 6th rounder, and that's not what happens either.
Now we say that I do think the defense has to show more.
For sure, I'm just saying
forward. The defense has to show more going forward. Or they're going to have to play this ball control style just to keep the defense off the field. But also, I kind of want to wait and see on that because after the Raiders game last year, which was the midpoint of the season, I remember doing a story and and asking a bunch of people about what do you guys have to fix on defense? It hasn't been that good. And then they went on their run.
Yeah.
So this can change midstream.
For sure. And again, we also have to pretty much wait. Darius Leonard is probably the most important player in that defense, or among them. I mean, no, he probably is the most important player in that defense. So again, it's kind of, you can judge them.
If they don't have Darius Leonard and Malik Hooker, that's 2 of the top 3 for sure.
I mean, you could add, honestly, if you looked at last year, wouldn't Sheard be pretty high up on that list?
Sheard would be. He's not as high now, but I have wondered several times if not having him has been an issue in the run game.
So is Kenny the one you're talking about then? Out of the best defenders? Am I missing somebody? Or Anthony? I mean, I don't know where you're at.
I'd say it's probably Justin Houston now. He's the other 3. Because Justin Houston, while he only has 1 sack, I think he's the fulcrum of the pass rush.
Okay. Pay a lot of attention to him. They have so far.
Yeah, he's the fulcrum of the pass rush, and he had a lot of pressures in the first 2 games, and then didn't have them. So I think he's the other one.
Okay. But you could make an argument that if you included Sheard as like Sheard, Hooker, Leonard, and who did I just miss? I just skipped somebody. Are those only 3 out?
Yeah.
3 of the first 5?
Easy. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, yeah, with Houston and maybe Kenny being the other
Houston
one.
and Kenny, or Autry and Kenny Moore.
Oh yeah, Danico is definitely.
Danico's important.
He's taking that step up. Okay, so maybe I don't know.
But it's 3 important players. It's 3 important players, and it'll be interesting to see. And you got to know whether or not Jabal Sheard is full Jabal Sheard, or if it's him coming off of an injury.
Trying to make sure that's what it's happening.
Yeah, or it'll be interesting for me to see if the run defense improves a lot when he's in there, because he's very good. He had 14 tackles for loss last year with only 5.5 sacks.
Yeah.
Like he makes plays in the run game that they haven't gotten really so far.
He'll be a huge piece when they get him back. He did practice today, I believe.
He has been practicing now for a week.
Yeah. He practiced today. He's limited as well, and it didn't sound like Reich was like. I don't think he was going to play.
No, I don't think he's going to play on Sunday.
Yeah,
I would be surprised at this point.
That might be another guy you might wait to the bye
based on Reich's answers, but it does. I mean, he's going to play at some point.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, they're not putting him on IR or anything like that, so no, he's going to be back soonish. So, and so will we. Here, how about that for a segue? We'll be back. We'll be back soonish. We'll come back on Sunday. We'll do another kind of instant reaction after the Colts Raiders game. It'll be up pretty soon because it's a home game, so it makes it a lot easier for us to get that recorded and up and posted and good.
And it's a noon game. Well, sorry. 1:00.
I know you grew up in the Central Time Zone, didn't you?
I lived in Central Time my entire life until moving here.
I still call them noon games because that's what I grew up. I grew up in Chicago, and I call them noon games. It's the weirdest thing. I got to get used to it.
I lived in Texas and Alabama and Louisiana, and I've never been on a Central Time. Also, this is just an aside. How in the heck is Auburn, Alabama, which is literally 20 minutes from the Alabama-Georgia line, Central Time, and Indianapolis, Indiana is not?
I don't know. It doesn't make any sense.
Who do I speak to?
I don't know. We need to get rid of... I hate time zones. I know they make sense. I hate them. Also, if I want to live on the West Coast because I want to watch my football at 10 a.m.
Mine's less of a time zone issue and more of a I don't want primetime games to start at 8:20.
I'm telling you, man. I stayed up to watch the Bears Washington game the other night. I was up till like midnight watching the end of that game. I'm an old man. I want to go to bed.
So state of Indiana. I don't care what the other arguments are. I care about 7:20 starts.
I think we should we should go from Colts insiders to time zone
just
insiders.
For 7:20 starts.
Fine.
And also, here's the other thing. Having lived in Alabama and marrying somebody from Alabama, when we drove up here to move here, we drove straight north from Alabama to Indiana. And at some point, I switched from Central Time to Eastern Time, and I did not go east. And that bothers me.
It should bother you.
It bothers me a lot.
It's ridiculous. No, see, my serious dream scenario. Sunday morning, you wake up, 10 a.m., the games are on. And also, Monday Night Football starts at like 5:30 when you're off of work.
See,
It's pretty good.
I'm more of a mountain time.
Okay, if you're gonna nitpick.
Mountain time's a little better.
Also, you have kids, so like they're going to bed.
5:30 for me is right in that like they really want food or should be eating food and it's distracting.
I should give them food probably.
Yeah, like I need the game to start late enough that the baby's down.
Well, Central Time works for you. 7:30 would be nice.
Yes.
Mountain's 6:30. I don't
6:30's right in the wing there.
I don't have kids, so I'm ready for that 5:30 start. I'm ready for that 5:30
You
start.
don't have kids, and you also want old man time.
Correct. I'd like to get up. I'd like to go to bed early and get up early and be an old man. That's what I want. So, yeah, there was some stuff that we talked about at the end there that wasn't scheduled. So we'll see how we.
But it's also a very serious request. Central Time, Indiana.
Okay.
For me.
We're gonna write it. Probably not. Join us again Sunday.